listening to the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour, the place to be to learn about the latest and greatest life stories from people who are doing incredible disability advocacy work. Kings Floyd, welcome to the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Kings Floyd is a disability rights activist, advocate, and writer based in Washington, D.C. She works to combine her unwavering passion for disability rights, healthcare, and mental health and wellness with intersectional communities. She graduated with a bachelor's in English writing with concentrations on language, education, and disability studies from High Point University. Her volunteer projects include working on the Women's March, the DC Pride Parade, the DC Pride March, and other civil rights demonstrations. Kings is also the co-chair of the DC Metro ADAPT. So welcome, Kings.
Thank you.
We're going to open our first questions. I've always liked your name, even from that first email when Taylor introduced us via email. First of all, I thought I was emailing a guy the whole time. And
many people do.
Yeah, many people do, yeah. And so I think it's a very unique and badass name. And so how did your parents come up with that? I know it's short for Kingsley.
So actually my uncle's name and my grandfather's name and my great-grandfather's name are all Robert Kingsley. And so I was going to be Robert Kingsley. When my mom found out it was a girl, she was like, okay, we can't keep the Robert, but we can keep the Kingsley. And it's a family name. I'm proud to have it.
Yeah, that's such an awesome name. So outside of your disability advocacy work, I know you do a ton of disability advocacy work. I know when I was on the Hill, I saw you several times. What else do you enjoy doing besides, doing disability advocacy activism work?
I am super creative, so I love making jewelry. I'm a very hands-on, tactile person. I'm also a big reader, so 90% of the time when I have free time, I have my head in a book. And I'm a writer not just for disability rights, but also creatively. And so that's something that allows me to kind of explore where I'm at in my life, journaling, bullet journaling, I've done all the crafty projects.
What are some of your favorite authors, whether that be disability related or not?
Sure. So I just finished a book. I'm going to have to think of the author's name. It was called This Is How It Always Is. And it's a story of a family whose youngest child comes out at a very young age as transgender. And it's a beautiful story in so many ways, the way it's written, the emotional complexity of the characters. But I'm going to have to look up the author's name. The book is called This Is How It Always Is.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So if you feel comfortable, what is your disability and how do you think it has impacted your life?
That's a very broad question, a very short question and a very broad question. So I have a myristoyl deficient, partial deficiency, muscular dystrophy. I was born with my disability. I was aware of my disability from birth. And I think it is not only a label that society assigns, but it's a lens that we see and color our life with. And so it's impacted me in every way, but it's also, not as prevalent in some other things that people might consider.
Mm-hmm. And when you were growing up, did you have any role models that had disabilities that you really looked up to? And if yes, who were they? If not, how do you think our society can make changes, whether in the media or other areas where people with disabilities are more visible, and we individuals with disabilities, whether you be wheelchair users like you and I, or other sorts of disabilities, have people that they see facing the similar challenges as them, and and able to feel that they can also live a vibrant life?
So I think regardless of whether I had role models or not, which is both true and untrue up to a point, we need more representation of people with disabilities in the media, because even though I had an in-person role model as young as 15 who had a disability, I was not represented to the greater scale of society in media, TV shows, movies. And so in that regard, I would have loved to have seen role models in media growing up that were experiencing similar, I'm not going to say problems, but life issues that come up that I could relate to through them. At the same time, I met Colleen Flanagan when I was really young, and she definitely helped shape the way that I do advocacy and I approach advocacy.
Can you give us details of how they changed that process for you?
Sure. So Colleen Flanagan took me to my first disability event when I was 14 or 15. And it was the first major event of any kind of political kind where I saw people with disabilities being represented in any type of government. The Massachusetts had just passed that October is National Disability History Month in public schools. And so we were getting this chance to create a curriculum that helped incorporate people with disabilities into everyday life. And I thought, well, I was young enough to think that the bill hadn't been passed yet, and we were going to a protest to pass the bill. What I didn't know is the bill had already been passed, and we were going to a rally to celebrate. And even though they were two different scenarios, the energy and the passion and the excitement for the change was so alive in the room. And I just thought, wow, this is the space I want to be in. And then, constantly striving to promote equity, especially in intersectional identities. We have a lot of balance issues in this country for people who have more privilege than others. And I think it's part of my responsibility as someone who does have that privilege to point it out to others so they can be mindful. And Rebecca Coakley is definitely a model for that behavior.
So as we said earlier, you are the co-chair, of the DC Metro ADAPT. So what compelled you to take on that role? And how do you think ADAPT has pushed the disability movement forward?
Sure. So going back to that rally that happened when I was 15 in Massachusetts, Colleen was a member of ADAPT and had told me a little bit about the organization. And I had heard of people and knew people from different organizations that overlapped. It wasn't until I moved to DC after college and was the youth fellow at the National Council on Independent Living that the Affordable Care Act was threatened. And it was going to be an incredibly big deal for so many people with disabilities to lose and or get severe cuts to their Medicaid service. And so my boss was like, hey, we need your support in this demonstration. And he said, it's fairly likely that you will get arrested. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'd rather be arrested and save healthcare. And so from there, I got the same energy. I got the same present, alive moment of making a difference. And that's really what motivated me to say, okay, we need an organized or mostly organized group of disabled activists and allies in DC where we can have this type of energy and use this momentum to push the issues that are important for our community forward.
Yeah, that segues really well into our next question. So I know you've been arrested multiple times, right, in the Capitol building, protesting with ADAPT on different disability issues. First of all, how was that experience? And for those who may be interested in participating in ADAPT, different individuals with disabilities all around the country, and don't know what that experience is like, can you just shed some light and give some vivid details of what it was like to be arrested, and how long you were under arrest before they freed you, and that whole experience just from beginning to end?
Like I said before, I have privilege. I am a white woman, and so it is a different situation for me to get arrested than, say, a person of color who is also disabled, or someone who is trans and also disabled, in that same situation. So before going into that story, it is a story of privilege, because I am not treated the same as other people who are committing the same crime. To that extent, you really look out for each other in ADAPT. ADAPT is a network of people connected by unbelievable bonds to all of the other people. And so we check in with each other. One of the beautiful things I love about sign language is it's nonverbal, and you can use it through a crowd. So even when everyone's chanting, you can catch someone's eye and check in with them and say, "Are you okay?" And that's really important, because you need to feel like your siblings around you, your chosen family, has got your back. And that trust is what allows you to put your body on the line. It was definitely a scary experience, and a lot of people ask me, like, "You're not nervous?" And I was like, "Yeah, I was, and I am every time I do it." But you have to overcome those nerves in order to say, okay, what is the greater good we are trying to push forward? We were arrested. We were held for over 9 hours, I believe, without access to an accessible bathroom, which was really uncomfortable for many people. And we finally got, we were in contact with, people who, I should say on the outside, but other members of our organization who were helping to, clear bonds and get a court date and get it like removed as I forget the legal term exactly, but so it's a misdemeanor instead of an actual crime. And it took a while. I think I was up at 6:30 in the morning, and I didn't get back till my apartment until that same time the next day. But it's also a rush of gratitude and adrenaline and excitement that you're giving something to the community. You're giving your voice and your body and your advocacy to make change happen.
So what are you most interested in advancing in that light of activism and giving your voice in the sphere of disability advocacy? What do you most want to see progress in the disability movement?
That's such a great question. I don't think I could pick just one. There are so many things that I feel like our community has the potential to be really great at, to work in. I'm working on accessible housing right now specifically, as well as drug and cannabis advocacy. But I also think, personal care attendants and the services that we get are in dire need of more support. So that's definitely an issue that I'm pushing and advancing forward. Also, the Air Carrier Access Amendments Act, getting people the potential and the ability to travel more easily and accessibly could really boost opportunities for a lot of members of our community. I think that's a noble and worthwhile cause to yell out for.
That's very admirable. And in terms of, I guess I should have followed up earlier when I asked you about role models, which is, growing up with your, growing up, how would you change about how your family and friends advocated for you in terms of disability access? Was there something that you thought they did really well in that other parents, friends should emulate? And or are there things that you think could be changed?
The answer is both. Yes. I am so lucky to have parents who are not the like super kind of cool, but the great kind of cool, in that they're incredibly supportive and they wanted me to have the most organic childhood experience. And I did dance and horseback riding and swimming lessons and was as busy as anyone could be, regardless of disability or otherwise. I was resistant when I was little to be involved in the disability community, but my parents recognized for me that it was important. I think I would have created more access to specifically people my age who were disabled, who were in the same area, because I didn't have necessarily peers who were around. They were either younger than me or older than me. But I had a lot of great advocacy as a kid. I have an aunt who's a director of special education in a school district in Maine. And so she was very knowledgeable about, IEPs, individual education plans in schools. I had a really good squad to help me navigate that. Still do.
That's awesome. In terms of being labeled, as a person with a disability, or, disability being the label or some other thing, do you feel comfortable labeling yourself as someone with a disability? Or is there some other more empowering words that you think could be used to conceptualize, us, people with disabilities, whether that be wheelchair users or other kinds of disabilities?
I prefer you're a person with a disability, you have a disability, you're a disabled person. All of those are fine in my book.
But you're okay with the word disability, whether being forward or backward?
Yes, I am.
And I feel like you're very involved in the disability rights movement, at least domestically, and you're very active and on social media as well. What are your views on the different coalitions that are, the different disability rights coalitions collaborating together in the U.S.? So if relevant to the question, what can be improved in terms of cohesiveness and establishing a unified agenda for the whole disability rights movement?
That's a big question. I'm not sure how to answer that. I think before we unify our goals, we need to recognize the minorities that are not being recognized in our community right now. And so I would like the initial priority of the disability community to raise the voices that they haven't been hearing thus far in the conversation, that have been trying to speak up, because I think that's the only way that we will have a cohesive agenda and goal, is if we are fully understanding who is in our community and respecting those people.
Very well said. What are the biggest challenges you foresee for the future of people with disabilities, and how do you think we can overcome these challenges in the near future?
I think we are doing it every day. I get very frustrated at the assumptions that people in general, not disabled people, not able-bodied people, just people in general, the assumptions that people make based on disability. And so I think the biggest challenge, but also the biggest reward, is challenging those assumptions to the best degree possible. And I think we are on the right track, and we just have to keep challenging those assumptions in order to keep gaining ground.
Yeah, very well said. So if we've moved on to our last section on travel, what are some of the biggest challenges you face traveling as a wheelchair user, rather that be traveling domestically or internationally, that you think could be improved?
Sure. So I was actually on the Hill a couple of weeks ago about the Air Carrier Access Act, which is to test for, in research for, allowing people with disabilities who have chairs, whether they be power or manual, to have the right to remain in them in the actual cabin of the plane. And so what tie downs look like, what seat belts look like, what emergency purposes. I would also like to be able to go to the bathroom on a plane, because when you're going from, DC to San Francisco, that's a longer flight with uncomfortable consequences if you're a person with a disability and you can't use the restroom. But that's not an option. I also know so many people whose chairs have been lost or damaged or completely broken by, TSA and as well as the handlers of equipment for individual agencies. And so having a unified memorandum of understanding of what the accommodation procedures are for people with different types of disabilities and their rights as a traveler is, I'm waiting for the agencies to see that that's where they need to improve.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then just as a last question, what are the perks and advantages of traveling in a wheelchair, if you can think of any?
There are always perks to a different perspective, whether that's I have to go in through the accessible entrance in the back of a restaurant and it's through the kitchen. And so I actually get to see how the food is being made. Or I am, traveling to a different place, either domestically or internationally, and it not only makes me memorable as a person with a disability, but it allows me to interact with the local community by asking questions regarding their tips, their, advice, but also their accessibility experience.
Those are all good points. And like I said, that was our last question. So thank you so much for participating today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Did you like this video? If so, share it with your friends and be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want even more resources, be sure to sign up for our email updates on our website, traipsingglobal.com. Keep learning new perspectives, keep being inclusive, because it will make the world a better place for you and for everyone else. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on another episode of the Traipsing Global on Wheels podcast hour.